I want to bring in Ohio Congressman Warren Davidson. Congressman Davidson, thanks for joining us. People just, listen, it's around the world, and people are fed up in this country in particular where it feels for many people that we're crossing the line of wanting to preserve life per se and encroaching on liberty that many believe is the true bedrock of our nation.
Yeah, I think that's the tension, Charles. You look at the two-way tug of war has been framed as between, public health and reopening the economy. But what the protests are all about is that third point is freedom. Americans generally take that for granted. It's a distinctive part of our culture, and it's been infringed upon, and in a lot of cases, more egregiously than others. And I think you see the pushback, most strongly in states where the governor's actions have been hard to reconcile, like in Michigan, where you can go out in a kayak but not a boat, and you're looking for rational things like, okay, I can be socially distanced and fish in Lake Michigan, and so you see some of that pushback. Part of it's emotional, but I think a lot of it proves a point that people can only be restrained from the way of life and the culture for so long.
How do we reconcile this? I read a report this morning that in Europe, they could be looking at 59 million people unemployed, and this thing lasting through 2024. You're part of the group that ultimately are going to have to help decide this. How are you reconciling this?
Well, it's an honor to be part of the President's Reopen America Task Force and essentially a committee of Congress, 22 Republicans, 10 Democrats. And so we've had some brief meetings, but I think, obviously you have to take into account the public health piece, but you also got to take into account the public health piece of staying closed. Let's just talk hospitals as an example. I mean, if you've got COVID-19 or an emergency, hospitals are still functioning. But if, that doesn't mean if you're not in the emergency room for a heart attack that you don't still need stents or bypass surgery or, a hip replacement. So for public health, even you're talking missing a cancer diagnosis by a month or two. I mean, this can't go on forever. There has to be a safe, standards-based way to work. And I think that's the point in phase one, is to go from essential versus non-essential and everybody hunker down to let's get a safe way to work with safeguards. And if those safeguards can be followed, then the PPE requirements are minimal. But if you've got to be inside the physical proximity of another person, then you have to ask, what's the appropriate PPE? And a lot of parts of our economy can function remotely, and I think a lot of people who didn't realize how remotely and how effectively they could work remotely are doing that. But some parts of the economy are going to have to be physically present, and we can find a way to do that safely.
To that point, we see in overseas where Norway, Denmark, Austria, even Italy, which for a moment there was the hardest hit, sort of the epicenter of this problem, of this crisis, all sort of coming back online, all pretty determined to get the wheels of commerce moving just a little bit here. Where's the pushback coming from? Is it really just the scientists kind of saying, Bill Gates those types saying, hey, just keep us shut down for 18 months, 24 months. It's the better part of valor. This thing will be completely gone. We'll have a vaccine. And whatever the economic damage is, we'll try to pick up the pieces.
Well, you look at, you were covering in earlier segments about literally negative oil prices. We do not have a way of life that functions without a pricing mechanism. If there's no demand side, if there's no buy side, there's no price signals. Our whole economy is very interdependent, and I think that's the piece that's coming back in part due to this essential versus non-essential, not just the restrictions on freedom, but the irrational restrictions, and say, look, if you can operate this business, if I can follow these rules, why can't I operate my business and have my livelihood and take care of my family and my neighbors? And so I think that's part of the pushback. And you do see around the world, just like you saw around the world, some places closing first, you are seeing other places open. So I think a lot of people in America want to push this against Donald Trump narrative. And the reality is it's a broad bipartisan sense that there does have to be a way to operate more of our economy, and certainly gradually and safely, but soon.
Congressman, thank you very, very much. We really appreciate you spending the time with us on this delicate balance, but we've got to come to some decisions here. Thank you very much.